Hi, everyone. My name is Annie Rogers, and on behalf of the ADDitude team, I am so pleased to welcome you to today's ADHD Experts webinar titled, We Define ADHD, Empowering Ways to Frame Our Awesome Brains. Today's webinar will feature a live conversation and Q&A with two very special guests, Kim and Penn Holderness. Penn and Kim are award-winning content creators known for their original music, song parodies, comedy sketches, and weekly podcasts. Their videos have resulted in more than 2 billion views and more than 9 million followers. Penn and Kim have been married for 19 years and were also the winners of season 33 of The Amazing Race. Yes, really. Earlier this year, Kim and Penn joined us at ADDitude for a webinar to discuss their New York Times best-selling book, ADHD is Awesome, a guide to mostly thriving with ADHD. If you want to replay that webinar, which we highly recommend, visit ADDitudemag.com and just search for podcast 505. Throughout all their endeavors, Penn and Kim have never shied away from tackling topics like living with ADHD and anxiety. The overwhelming positive feedback and support from their online community was a major motivation behind their ADHD book. Penn and Kim live in Raleigh, North Carolina, with their children, Lola and Penn Charles, and their dog, Sunny. To learn more about the Holderness family, visit theholdernessfamily.com. And just before we dive into today's conversation, I have just a couple housekeeping items I'll get out of the way. If you are tuned into our live webinar, add your questions anytime by navigating to the text box under the video player. And for answers to common questions about slides, transcripts, all that stuff, click on the FAQ tab of your webinar screen. If you're not reading ADDitude Magazine, we encourage you to visit additudemag.com/subscribe and subscribe today to get copies for yourself and to share with a teacher or a loved one who could benefit from greater ADHD understanding. Just click the magazine tab on your screen to learn more. Any further ado, I would love to begin by wishing everyone a happy ADHD Empowerment Month. Penn and Kim, thank you so much for joining us for this first ever ADHD Empowerment Month. And yes, we have sort of rebranded it from awareness to empowerment. That was on purpose. So beginning this year, ADDitude is shifting the focus from educating others to celebrating individuality, from external acceptance to internal acceptance, and from deficit and disorder to strength and advantage. So that's why we thought it made perfect sense to have you both here to help us kick off ADHD Empowerment Month and to continue the conversation we had earlier this year based on ADHD is Awesome. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having us.
That was a really nice introduction, and I am here for all of the reframing.
Yeah.
Well, good. We are in the same headspace. And, I thought we would just kick off with the elephant in the room, right? With ADHD itself. In your book, Penn, you called attention deficit hyperactivity disorder the worst name ever, in part because, and I quote, it's a string of really negative words in a row. And I know a lot of people listening hear this and feel this. Can you tell us a little bit more, share your thoughts on why ADHD is a problem name and perhaps some more accurate and uplifting names for what we now call ADHD?
Yeah, so the mean diagnosis for ADHD, we just talked about this when we were saying hello, Annie, is 7, 8 years old, pretty young. Imagine being in a doctor's office and them saying you have ADHD. Oh, wait, here's what it stands for. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So 3 negative words in a row, just like 3 little gut punches. Bam, bam, bam. I even felt that way when I was told that I had it when I was 20 years old. and my emotional, regulatory functioning was a little bit better than that of a child. It's not accurate. We do not have, as Ned Hallowell said 30 years ago, we do not have a deficit of attention. We have an abundance of attention. We have difficulty focusing that attention. Sometimes it's not hyperactive. Sometimes it's inattentive. So that's an incorrect term there. And you can certainly make an argument, as we have, that it's not a disorder. It is a brain difference. So it's not a well-defined term. The names used to be worse. It used to be called morbid defective moral control 100 years ago. So at least we've made progress, but I think we can make a little bit more progress and come up with a name that that at least, it doesn't have to explain everything, but maybe just don't get everything wrong when you're naming it.
Yeah. It's interesting. We asked ADDitude readers a few months ago if they thought ADHD was a terrible name, and 52% said yes. 34% said they were neutral, and 14% were on board, but overwhelmingly they agreed with you. And here, Penn, I just pulled a few of the examples from your book about better names for ADHD.
Yeah, my favorite obviously is the vast difference, which that's just because I like
potty
really
humor.
Cool, yeah, potty humor. Probably the one that if I had to put my, I don't want to say like my political force, my support. If I could put my support behind any of them, it'd probably be selective focus advantage.
I like that.
It's a positive term. I know everyone's going to say, well, you're not talking about the symptoms. Well, I'm tall, and everyone thinks of that as I have long legs and I can see over a lot of people. There's symptoms of that too. I can't, my hips and knees are falling apart now. I can't sit in airplanes or buses, but largely positive, tall, right? Like that's a nice thing. So there's no reason we can't talk about the positives when it comes to a name instead of just hitting people with the negatives. So really, like, any of these are better than the current name.
I do welcome anyone who's listening live to share with us ideas that you have. We did collect some from our readers a few months back. So here's some inspiration for you guys. Neurospicy.
That's great.
Love that.
Capacity management syndrome.
Okay.
That one makes you stop and think.
Yeah.
Exceptional artistic ability of the genius variety.
Ooh.
Okay. Can't live up to your bullcrap expectation syndrome.
Can I stop and say something about this? This is my favorite one. I think if we get rid of your, it could be club, C-L-U-B, like club syndrome. And I do believe that ADHD is an exclusive, awesome club.
Yeah.
Like, we're part of a club of like very cool thinkers. So the acronym club really works. And I don't know if the person who did this on purpose, but it's freaking genius. Yeah.
I like that. Just wait, we're going to be rebranded Club ADDitude.
Club ADDitude. I love it.
The variable attention trait disorder. I don't know if I would stick disorder in there.
If disorder wasn't there, I could be into that.
And Ned also came up with variable attention stimulus trait a long time ago, VAST.
Yes.
So they're very close to this one, which would be a perfect explanation. Some say that it's also a good idea to try to get some of the emotional dysregulation in there. But again, it may be impossible to say everything that it is when it comes to it.
It's such a spectrum. It's so hard.
Yes. And different people experience different, in different ways too. Executive malfunction disorder. Again, mal means bad, and I'm not sure. But we're not judging. We're just sharing what people have sent to us. Emotional regulation disorder. So that one is just front and center with that emotional, regulation part. Zoomies is cute.
My dog has that. Absolutely.
Yep.
Dysregulated attention disorder, which DAD is a nice.
I love that one.
Yeah.
Is a nice acronym, and it seems.
Attention difference. Yeah.
Yeah, difference.
Yeah.
You can honestly take any disorder and change it to difference in this list.
Agreed. And this one too, selective attention impulse difference said. neuro overload disorder, chronic overwhelm difference, race car brain. And I like the last, dopamine, attention, variability, executive dysfunction. Dave,
I really like if we could workshop that last one, I think there's promise there.
Dave.
Yeah.
Club Dave.
Yeah.
They're all still better than what we have.
Yeah.
All of them are better. Even the ones that are negative are better than the one that we have right now.
That's right. Well, this kind of leads to what is a big topic for a lot of people listening today. And that is we'll touch on both, but for their children, as they are newly diagnosed and they're working to reframe this thing that has a terrible name. They are looking for some ideas and some inspiration about how they can better describe ADHD to bolster their kids' self-esteem and sense of strength. Kim, you recently wrote a really great blog post for us on this exact topic. How can I help my child feel more positive about their ADHD? And I wonder if you could share some of the messages from that blog post. And I will just note that it is linked from our homepage. So if anyone wants to read it, it is there for later consumption as well.
Thanks for the setup on that. That was, I loved writing that. And I think my contribution in the book ADHD is Awesome was mostly as a parent and a partner. And I have to tell you, we knew so much about ADHD. We were already in the process of research and writing this book when my son got his official diagnosis. I mean, we'd always suspected, but to get that official diagnosis and the doctor telling us it came off as like, this really awful diagnosis, like a really serious illness. Like, I'm sorry, you've got ADHD. And we knew so much about it. So literally in the car, we had to do, like, he and I had to do this like huge reframe. Our kids know already how much ADHD sucks. So forgive me if I'm not, like, we got some blowback on calling ADHD is awesome, which is totally valid. If you're not reading the book about, seeing the nuances of what awesome means. But I just don't think our kids need more of how much it sucks. They're getting it every day in school. My son, basketball practice, we're getting texts from parents like, your son left his cell phone here. Like, that's and then he felt so ashamed. He was so embarrassed. Like, they get it. They get the bad stuff every day. So I think our job as parents, my job personally, is to really help him through this. So one of the many ways is, he left his cell phone for like the third time this school year. Me yelling at him about that and getting super frustrated and making him feel worse for his ADHD brain, that's going to start this shame spiral that is going to be impossible to lift him out of for days. I'm sort of like this recovering perfectionist. So if anybody yelled at me once, that is the last time I'll do it. So that in my brain, like that, I just don't want anybody to be mad at me. So I would never forget my cell phone again. His brain, he's delayed. He's not, it's not that he'll never forget to bring his, never, remember his cell phone. He's just delayed in that. So in our house, we try to connect, not correct. So I said to him, like, we were driving home and Penn's calling me. He's like, hey, they've got his cell phone. And to him, hey, buddy, that's hard. He goes, oh, I can't believe I did that. I'm like, hey, it's really hard. You had a lot going on today. You had 2 tests. There's a lot going on. It's a lot to manage. And then when temperatures cooled, I'd be like, okay, obviously your cell phone's hard to keep track of. Is there a pocket in your backpack you can keep it in when you're not using it? Maybe we keep, and he's like, okay, yeah. Okay, it slid out of this pocket, so maybe it goes into a zipper. So like, then we bring it down. Yeah.
It's so important with our emotions. I mean, just me as someone who has ADHD, hearing that story, I know that he was overwhelmed with shame. It wasn't just a small pang. It was like, God,
he's like, I'm an awful person.
So, just and what Kim did, which is so awesome, because she is a perfectionist, and this is not her natural lane, right? Her just giving it time to de-escalate and have that emotional overload that come down a little bit.
Yeah, and not saying we're perfect, because there have been times when he has done his homework but not hit the submit button, and like how many times he's not. So like, it is hard, and I've not been perfect about always keeping my cool, but it works best when I can keep my cool. So connect, don't correct. The other thing I think that we've really had to look out for is times when he's doing awesome.
Yeah.
And so, and pointing out, because he will get, so turning his homework is a struggle, but the homework he's doing, he's looking at these math problems and he's solving them so quickly. And I'm like, hey, dude, because he's able to like visualize things. He doesn't write down his work either, because he can kind of see it like a beautiful mind, right? And I say, hey, listen, that's awesome. Your brain is pretty special.
Mm-hmm.
Like my brain, like normal brains can't do that. Same with music. Just like he's not a musician, but he could very easily, like if you played a song for him, he could just focus on it and he can start plunking it out. So you can say, that's special. What you have is special. And even when he's super focused on something, like he was trying to do a front flip on the trampoline, and he was out there for I think he was hyper focused on it, hours and hours and hours. I'm like, okay, that was really cool how you were able to stick with it until you got it. And like, that's a pretty special gift of your brain. So I just think those two things of connect, don't correct, and finding times when they're killing it has been really helpful.
Okay, that's really great. It makes me think of, a question you brought up, like that, how he can get really down on himself, and the connection can help with that. And we got quite a few questions ahead of the event, actually, from folks who were like looking for examples. If you can share one on the fly of a time, Penn, when you personally faced setback, disappointment, a mistake, and how you kind of mentally framed it for yourself so that you could get past it and move on with lessons learned, but without carrying that shame.
Man, that's a good question, because most of the time when I get asked that question, I talk about how I messed up and how my family supported me. Like when I, leave the burner on and I leave the house and the smoke alarm goes off, and my family does like what Kim does. But it is important to have like a backstop as well for your own mind and own brain when you start to overload. So one of the things that we talked about in the book when I make a mistake is zooming out if you can, because your brain is very if your ADHD brain is very inclined to look at the one event that just happened and use that to essentially assess your entire self-worth, right? And so an exercise that I learned from an ADHD coach was to try to zoom your brain out. Like, let's say it's an example. I left the stove on, right? And I almost burned the house down. The house didn't get burned down. So you zoom out and you look at the day. Did we call the fire department? No, we did not. Is everyone okay? Yes, everyone okay. What else is going on around the house? Well, I was able to make my son breakfast. I got him off to school. So this is one thing that happened in a gigantic world in which you live. Don't let that one thing that you're fixated on define you as a person. So the process is just called zooming out. And a lot of times,
it takes some time.
Yeah,
it's not right away.
You have to do it a couple of times in order to realize that everything's going to be okay. But that was an exercise that I learned.
I think it was interesting. I used to say like, when we were doing work stuff or whatever, I'm like, Penn gets easily. I used to say like he just gets easily overwhelmed. But what I know now is it's his ADHD brain kind of floods, and I think that now he has a history of like zooming out. One bad thing doesn't mean I'm a bad person. But even in that day, he knows for like an hour, it's going to be rough. But he also knows like deep breaths. I'm going to walk through this. And on the other side, it's going to be clarity. But it's like a dark cloud he has to walk through. And he does it every time. But I just think that knowing it's going to be hard, sometimes I see him doing it now. Like he does a much better job of kind of like walking through that. And by the way, he was always great. Like he never took it out on me. I could just see he was so hard on himself. Which is hard to see your person being so hard on themselves.
Right. And sometimes our kids do take it out on us, but
100%.
Sometimes that's because those kids are so desperate for stimulation, even getting yelled at is a form of stimulation.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Even doing something wrong and getting in trouble is a form of stimulation. Like when you're very young.
Yeah. And it's hard. I mean, it's hard. It's hard,
Yeah.
parents. It's hard. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I will say, we think that the ADDitude readers are the smartest experts around. And we asked them if you were describing ADHD to a newly diagnosed child, how would you portray it in a way that builds self-esteem, hope, and resolve? So we received about 200 responses, but I wanted to share a few here today in hopes that it might help someone listening. And these were just a few that we as a team that really hit us.
These are great.
Isn't it? Yes.
Yeah.
A beautiful brain in a challenging environment. I just love that framing. Love it. Different gameplay mode enabled on some brains. I feel like that might hit with some with some kids out there. A beautiful, strong, untamed horse that will take you where it wants to go at dangerous speeds. As its rider, you can train, befriend, and tame your horse. You also have to train and develop your strength, agility, and resolve. So hold on. You can work in powerful harmony. It can be done.
Oh, I love that.
Right? A kaleidoscope. I can see, hear, and think in stereo. The X-Men power. It requires a lot of training and effort to use it for good. Otherwise, it can be ostracizing and scary. We have a few more. I loved this one. It's like winning the brain lottery. You've hit the jackpot because you have all the fun ideas first and can't wait to share them all, like an explorer on a new planet busting to tell the rest of the universe. I also like this one as a car person. Your ADHD appears to be a junky car, but with a supercharged 427 under the hood. Being accepted isn't the goal. The goal is to take your gift and change the world with it. Like, really good. A term that describes a brain that inconsistently regulates the systems it is in charge of. While this might seem like a bad thing, many people with ADHD are able to see, hear, taste, and feel things that others might miss. This makes these people exceptional artists, musicians, filmmakers, writers, chefs, therapists, teachers, and many other things.
Goosebumps. Getting goosebumps.
I know, right? Yes.
I have a lot of things to say here, and I'll try.
The webinar. We only have so much time.
I'm going to try to narrow it down to this. First of all, this is such a proof of brand because I think this was probably written by some people who have ADHD, or at least people who truly understand it. And it's showing that real creativity and innovation because you're talking about this in a way that most people have never thought of it. And it's going to do a lot of good. Like this needs to be amplified across many channels. The other thing that I want to note is that this is another proof of brand. Like, we're not the reason you should be on this seminar. It's the people, it's the community here that has the real power. It's the fact that this is a spectrum disorder and we have 1,300 people who are genuinely invested in reframing this thing. And that amount of power results in something like this. I love every single one of them. My favorite is probably the X-Man power. And it's because superpower has been getting a little bit of flack lately. It seems like you say superpower and you're like, hang on a second. Let's not go overboard here, but it explains the way that we describe superpowers, and that it does require training and effort. If you watch the X-Men, they show up with these raw skills and they don't know how to refine them until they go to a school and do a ton of work to get better at it. So I love that reference.
Yeah, and to be clear, these were entirely contributed by ADDitude community members. And we, as a team, are constantly in awe of the responses that we get from our readers and listeners. The simplest question can yield like paragraphs of insight that clearly people have been thinking about, for weeks, months, maybe years, and can express things so beautifully. So, we give credit to our audience. We would not be ADDitude without the folks who are listening today. Yeah. No way, no how. speaking of them, one person did write in today and said exactly what you just said, Penn. ADHD as a superpower, that's frustrating, right? Because they said, quote, they said it's an impairment. But saying that ADHD unlocks a level of creativity and outside the box thinking that neurotypical people don't have is a true statement that doesn't lie about the hardships of ADHD. And Penn, you just wrote a really great blog post for ADDitude with some concrete examples of how you have harnessed your ADHD brain and the creative power therein. And I wonder if you could tell us about that, how you've kind of made it your strategic advantage.
Well, I think the first thing that you do is what that writer just put in there, which is understand the dichotomy, right? There's two sides to this brain. There's probably two sides to every brain, but there's never been two more clear sides to a brain than there are to an ADHD brain. And the part of it that makes you flighty, that makes you forgetful, that makes you spontaneous and sometimes even impulsive, that comes across as disrespectful to your friends because you're sort of darting all over the place, that trait also leads to innovation, creativity, discovery, and sometimes that actually leads to some pretty creative problem solving. And so what I've learned is that if I edit my environment correctly and I'm not doing any of those other things disrespectfully to the people around me, because a lot of those first things that I described, that's me inconveniencing other people, which is a problem. I don't want to inconvenience the people around me. But that ability, because this side of your brain that is having trouble focusing is also taking in so much stimulus and discovering so many things about the world around them. It's the reason why we're having a tough time having a conversation with someone in front of us. If you're part of a job that requires creative solutions, like I am, that same trait allows you to pick things out of the universe pretty quickly and efficiently, sometimes faster and more efficiently than those with neurotypical brains, and lead to real, true inspiration and creativity.
I absolutely loved the example that you shared of how you were able to sort of pick out the essence of a challenge when you were working with the Velcro brand.
Yeah. Do you want me to, I guess I can explain that too. Sorry. So basically it was the funniest meeting ever. It was like an ADHD person's dream because I was sitting there with these lawyers for Velcro, like a billionaire company. It's Velcro, right? And they needed a marketing campaign. We didn't know what it was. And the guy comes out and he goes, "Listen, we need people to stop saying Velcro." And I was like, "What? Huh? What do you mean?" They're like, "It's not Velcro. It's hook and loop." I'm like, "What do you mean? No, this is Velcro." I'm like, I've been calling it Velcro my life. They're like, "No, our company's brand name is Velcro. This is called hook and loop. If people don't start calling it hook and loop, we're going to lose the ability to enforce our trademark." And that's when I learned all about what's it called, patents, genericide?
Yeah.
Where basically a word becomes so familiar, a brand becomes so familiar for their product that they lose the ability
like
to.
Like Xerox, right. Kleenex, yeah.
So I'm like, this is a ridiculous problem. They're like, we're going to lose millions of dollars if we don't treat people or teach people that this is the issue. And so my ADHD brain is like, this is so funny. These people are so rich. They're like, this is the biggest, fanciest office I've ever seen. This is the most what do I do here? And then my brain started remembering things. It was remembering like
the meeting was still happening, by the way.
Yeah. Sorry. They're all talking. And I've gone off into la la land. And I'm thinking of like back when they had the first world problem memes of like that woman with the headache that was maybe 10 years ago about like how their dog didn't, they missed their grooming appointment or whatever. Like, I'm just thinking this is such a ridiculous problem. And I'm thinking, okay, is there a way that we can actually have these lawyers own up to the fact that this is a ridiculous problem? And then I'm thinking like, what could make it seem super dramatic? And then somehow We Are the World popped up in my head. And anyone who's my age remembers it was this USA for Africa fundraiser that they did for starving children in Africa. And I was like, could I make it feel like they're doing a We Are the World song, but for a $1 billion company trying to ask people not to say the name of their own product? And as that happened, the other part of my ADHD brain that I can access most of the time is musicality. And I do believe that a lot of musicians do have ADHD. And a song started forming in my head. The meeting's still going on. And thank God, Anne Marie, who was with me, who works at our company, she's like, "You're writing the song, aren't you?" Because I'm sure the people who were there were confused that I wasn't making eye contact or paying attention.
Yeah. So this is the song he came up with.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So we're gonna play, I hope, the video that was basically born in Penn's brain in like the time that we have spent so far in this webinar. So as an illustration, a real life illustration of ADHD creativity in action, please enjoy.
We're a company that's so successful that everywhere you go, you see the scratchy, hairy fastener, and you say,
"Hey, that's Velcro."
But even though we invented this stuff, our patent lapsed 40 years ago. Now no matter who else makes it,
you still want to call it Velcro.
You think it's awesome for us, we're famous, but we're lawyers and it's causing us grief. Cause there are trademark laws being broken. It's all here in this short legal brief.
And we know that this is confusing because Velcro branded who we are.
But if you call it all Velcro,
we're gonna lose our circle line.
This is called hook and loop. This part's a hook, this part's a loop. You call it Velcro, but we're begging you. This is f***ing hook and loop.
we know this seems ridiculous. This is a first world situation.
And we made $500 million last year.
I went to turn through my last vacation.
And we're asking you not to say the name we took 60 plus years to build. But if you keep calling these Velcro shoes, our trademark will get killed. Yeah!
We aren't just doing this for us. We're doing it for all the successful brands that got so popular, people started using the brand names the wrong way. So please, remember.
If you need something to clean up your socks, do it with bleach and not with If you have blood from a boo-boo you made, this is a bandage and not a If you're exercising with someone you're dating, it's inline skating and not I know that bleach stuff is more fun to say, but if you keep doing it, our trademarks go away.
This is called hook and loop. This part's a hook, this part's a loop. You call it Velcro, but we're begging you. This is f***ing hook and loop.
There it is.
Wonderful.
That's my favorite. And he wrote that in like 20 minutes.
Right? I mean, sometimes I feel like you gotta see the creativity.
I know. Like that's not a normal brain doesn't do that. Like a normal, if you had said, Kim, you can't come out of this room until you write a song or any sort of treatment about getting people to stop using, I would still be in there. So
yes. And I did think of you when I heard the unfortunate news this last week that Tupperware has filed for bankruptcy because of this very problem. So
heartbreaking.
It is the weirdest loophole in law that if you make a product that's so successful that people just associate all everyday products with it, you lose the ability to enforce it unless you make a viral video, I guess. I'm not sure. It's become, like, we've talked about this so many times with people because of stories like the one that you're telling.
I mean, a world without Tupperware, a world without Velcro. I feel like you're saving the world. So I do want to add to the creativity conversation a few more stories from the ADDitude audience. I'll read a few. Again, we asked our readers to tell us what ADHD creativity means to them and has materialized in their lives. And Karen from Ohio wrote that she said, I attribute my son's writing ability and creativity to his ADHD. He was able to complete 2 books and have them published by age 12.
Wow.
I know. And here's another one. At age 12, I learned how to play chess. When I was 14, I won my first of several tournaments. I didn't understand why I saw upcoming sequences that others could not. I assumed they weren't trying. It wasn't until in my 40s that a college president explained there was something about me that allowed me to see things that others didn't. That was from John in Illinois. And Robin from Colorado wrote, "My son takes the most amazing photographs. We can be looking at the same things, but he sees it in a different light and can capture that moment on film." I have one more from Carrie in New Jersey. She said, "I could never read music because of my dyslexia, but I discovered I have an ear for it. My ADHD gave me the hyper focus to teach myself how to play piano, drums, and guitar when music lessons failed me."
That's amazing.
Just great stories. Yeah. So creativity and comes in many, many different flavors.
If I can say really quickly, like, so I have a lot of people have a belief that creativity comes from inspiration, and inspiration is just discovering something that's already out there, like plucking it out of the universe. The fact that we do have this abundance of attention going in a million different directions, I think that's why the chess player is able to look at all these possibilities all at the same time and come up with a creative solution and be good at it. Why a book writer can go down take multiple paths and go down a creative avenue that comes up with a book. Why musicians are able to pluck notes out of the air and be able to charge them into their fingers and play them instead of reading.
Yes. We're getting a number of questions I realize I didn't answer, but Penn, maybe you can. Everyone wants to know. So what did the Velcro people think of the video? How did it do?
I'll answer this. It went super viral on YouTube, and then like kind of organically, that was before people paid to have their videos like boosted. And so it was like organically went viral, and then it got so much attention in the media. Anderson Cooper played the entire video in his show, and they would cut to him just giggling because he has the funniest laugh. So it got so much organic coverage that it was such a huge success. People wrote case studies about it. Like, it was very well received. Yeah.
So now I have something in common with Anderson Cooper. All right.
Okay.
I think one of the things, it's definitely an illustration of creativity, but it's also, I think the video is an illustration of ADHD problem solving, right? Like, you instantly kind of saw the problem and like a very creative way to solve it. So that's kind of one of the other, we asked the ADDitude audience, like, what are the facets of ADHD that have actually served them best? And problem solving came up at the top of the list. So I wanted to touch on that topic and see if you had stories or examples of times when you saw, either one of you saw ADHD problem solving in action, and how we might recognize that in our kids when it happens to, again, like build the self-esteem and reframe.
Do you want to take that first?
Well, this is a really obvious example, but we were on The Amazing Race, and it was just this place where everything was challenging. Everything was of personal interest because there was $1 million on a line. Everything was new and exciting, and it just it resonated with the ADHD brain. I think we like a good puzzle or problem that we've never seen before, and the challenge of trying to solve it. And for me, like, it was just, there were no distractions, and it was just that problem. And I felt like I did pretty well in a lot of those little like challenges. It's funny, like, I think I probably got a 10 out of 10 on most of them. And then the really easy one, I completely failed at. Like, I overthought, and I sat, and we went from first to last place because I was staring at a clue and thought, this can't be this easy. It can't just be a clue. And I stayed there for 40 minutes.
Well, I think that also, like, the things that are hard for most like typical brains sometimes are very easy for the ADHD brain. So things that my brain sees as a problem, his brain, my son's brain, it's just like, oh, well, isn't this obvious? Like, you should do it this way. So I feel like I sometimes, because I'm a rule follower, I like to know what's happening. I like to, stay on course. And, we'll run into a traffic situation, or, the road we were about to take is closed. And I'm like, no, we were supposed to go this way. Like, I want to stick to the path. And he's already rerouted us in his brain. And that's pretty typical. And I resist it because it's like this spontaneity. The problem solving happens so quickly, and he's so spontaneous with it that my sort of rigid brain resists sometimes. And so sometimes there's a little bit of a conflict. But he just has sort of a solution for everything. And I see it most every day in work, because I'll have a great idea about something like this. I think this thing is really funny. I just don't know, what am I doing wrong? And he'll kind of polish things up, flip it upside down, whatever, and then deliver something that's super funny and will go viral.
We did ask our readers this as well. And those of you who are looking at the slides will see we've got a short URL there for more stories of creative problem solving, but I'm going to share a few of these too, because again, the specifics are so illustrative. Lisa from Wales wrote to us and said, at work, colleagues were attempting to reorganize a room so that a light fixture was not accessible when you stood on the bed. I don't know why. Don't ask me why. They were discussing moving the wardrobes when I came in and said, why not cut the legs off the bed? So we did. And it was so much easier.
But I imagine a hotel room design or something.
Yes. Okay. Right.
Yeah.
Yes. An ability to see patterns allowed me to devise a flow chart that simplified an admissions process in a mental health facility. It allowed me to see an element that might be missing during an intake interview, which led to better diagnosis and care. That was from Rinda, and obviously a problem solved that had a real impact on people's lives. And then Cynthia from Illinois wrote in and said, my career has been spent solving complex global supply chain problems. I've always been known as the creative, inventive, process-driven executive. So I have a feeling there are, hundreds more examples probably sitting right here today. If you have one, feel free to write it in the box, and I'll keep an eye out for it. But I did want to get to kind of the last trait that our readers identified as the ADHD trait that had served them the best in life, and that is resilience. And we talked a little bit about this already, about kind of bouncing back from a setback. But I wonder if you have anything else to share on how to build up that muscle of resilience and perseverance.
Yeah. Gosh, a lot of that has to come from within, right? I mean, you can have, I have a Kim. I'm very lucky. There's only one Kim, and I have a Kim, and she's been such a great supporter when it comes to this. I think the number one thing that helped me be resilient was understanding how my brain worked, and the fact that it is a chemical flood that is happening to me when something goes bad, right? It is as if, and Marcy Caldwell, who we love, she's from ADDitude.org, talks about the ADHD brain being a fishbowl. And if something goes wrong, all the water in the fishbowl gets dyed the color red. What that means is it's not just the one thing. It's everything around you is red. It's angry, it's sadness, it's frustration. But if you give it a second, it'll dissolve, or something will come along different. That's, a dog will come and snuggle up to you, your wife will give you a kiss, and the drip goes to blue, and all of a sudden the red is completely gone. And so for me, when I'm in the red, having that image and having that understanding that this is going to pass, my brain takes care of the rest. It gets me back naturally to a resilient state. But it's really, to me, the muscle that I've had to flex was understanding when I'm in it. Penn, you're flooding. You are emotionally dysregulating right now, even though you're 50 years old. There's no shame in this. It's the brain that you have. Not everybody does this. It's going to pass soon.
That's a great reminder. I want to share one comment from our audience, and then I also have some great examples of creativity and problem solving to share that have come in. But this one really like brought me to tears, quite honestly. Sam in the UK on the topic of resilience said, I was told I might not be able to walk again. I suffered from depression and had small goals and kept going. I worked hard. I pushed myself with my high expectations, and now I can walk with a walking stick. It was one of the most challenging things I've ever had to do. It has taken me years to get to where I am today, but I did it because I'm resilient and strong. I'm grateful. I'm proud. Thank you, ADHD.
Oh, I love
mean,
that.
yeah, it doesn't get much more moving than that. Okay, so now a laugh. Someone here wrote in creative problem solving example was that they bought a car with Home Depot gift cards. Very impressive.
How? Wait, I need
gotta
more.
Be more to a story there, but
I could probably reverse engineer that, but yeah. You could probably they probably bought the Home Depot. No, sometimes the Home Depot gift cards or gift cards in general will go on sale. Like if you pay $100 for you can get a $100 gift card for $80. And so they probably bought like $5,000 in cards, but only paid $4,000 and then offered to give them gift cards instead of cash. This is how I just read.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I was like, I did not know that Home Depot sold
Or
cars.
they bought all the tools at Home Depot necessary to build a car.
No, that's not what happened.
No.
They got discounted Home Depot cards.
Yeah.
Great. I love that now we're going to have lots of theories streaming in here as well. And let's see, Emily wrote in and said, I have the experience of working with a typical brain person, and they are overwhelmed by the tasks that fire me up. And I'm overwhelmed by the tasks that they thrive at with executive functioning. We do dynamite projects together.
100%. Same. Like Penn can sit down at this really complicated edit and I have to like tap him on the shoulder at 5:00 and say, hey, it's time to go. Like he's so focused on it. That is so overwhelming to me, but it just lights his brain up. So we make a good pair. Yeah.
This one is a good creative problem solving. This is from Cinders, who said that they were the tiniest of a 20-team tug of war against a wrestling team that they were obviously going to lose. Said, I devised a plan to let the rope go to them immediately, and then we just got dragged. They were all on their butts. So they won, basically, with some creative problem solving.
Oh, I love that.
So I don't know how old this person is, but they did that in Revenge of the Nerds, and it was a really good scene in the movie.
I do remember that.
Really clever problem solving scene.
That movie.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. I am going to turn to some of the live questions that have come in during our conversation. And one that we've received quite often is how to help teachers see the gifts of the awesomeness of ADHD. Have you had any good experiences in collaborating with teachers?
Yes.
Yeah.
But we've also had probably the experience everybody else has had on here too. So we've had both.
Yeah. So I think, I know I keep coming back to this. It comes back to education and understanding, I think largely. I think that if a teacher understands the way that we do what's going on in a child's brain, they're going to be more likely to give grace and understanding. They're going to be more likely to take a strengths-based approach, which is like finding the things that your kid is really excelling at and trying to push that. There are movements, including like, we have a great friend who lives here in Raleigh named Dr. Emily King, who does seminars with educators and superintendents.
Great work. Yeah.
She also has a podcast. She has a website, and she speaks teacher-ese. Like that's her main audience, and her most positive impact has been educating teachers about what type of brain this is. And she will tell you that it's getting better, but getting better is still probably a minority of teachers.
And I will, to defend teachers, I will say we do these book signings, and we've had so many teachers come and they want to get a book signed. They don't have ADHD, but they have so many kids that do, and they just want to learn more to better serve them. So there are so many teachers with such good hearts out there, But I also understand because I volunteered in the classroom, especially when my kids were little, and you got a couple hyperactive, traditionally presenting ADHD kids. They're very hyperactive, and you got to get something done. It's hard. So like we're putting a lot on the teachers, but the answer is we've had, it sometimes takes a couple like more meetings than you want it to take. And you have to fight for more accommodations than it. And some people are super accommodating and some people think like, why can't they just focus or try harder? And like trying harder is like not a real thing. And that I resisted against it too. My instinct was like, just try harder. Like that's not a real thing you should be saying to an ADHD kid.
Penn, can you mention the name of the podcast again for?
Sure. It's
Dr. Emily
It's
King?
called Learn with Dr. Emily.
Yeah.
And the best place to just find her is Dr. Emily King. We've had her on our podcast a couple of times.
She's great. And
so if that pops up first, you can listen to her there.
Yeah.
But she just she speaks the language of an advocate for a student in a school environment better than probably anybody.
She works mostly with parents for that reason, and she helps kind of facilitate the language and that you should be using with your teacher. So, and she works within the school systems. School systems pay her to come in. So she's a really great resource.
That's wonderful. We're going to look at that too. So,
she's amazing. You guys should have her on and do lots of stuff with her.
We will also include the information in the show notes and the follow-up resources. So if you're listening,
and her office is like right there.
But
Like it's
that's
through
helping
trees.
people.
I know, isn't that just a great coincidence? So she's like right there. Yeah, she's great. Yeah.
I will move to a more adult-focused question, and that was someone wrote to say that both they and their child have ADHD, and they wrote in to say, my spouse is fed up with my ADHD. She refuses to learn about it, and now their 7-year-old child has been diagnosed. How can I encourage her to take the time and have the curiosity to research ADHD with an open mind?
That is so hard.
It's the challenge for ADHD Empowerment Month, right? Like
that is so hard because there are, we've encountered on our path with this, like ADHD deniers, like it's not real. Everybody's getting this diagnosis. Everybody's has a short attention span. I would hope. So a common story we've heard is people read our book or they listen to you guys or they whatever, and they're for their kids, and then they're better able to understand themselves or their partners. So I wish I had the right words, but I would hope that even if it's like for the kid, to try to present resources like, hey, this will help you better understand like the amazing brain that our kid has. Hopefully that'll help. I have to say, selfishly, as he's an adult, and so I'd get a little resentful. I'm like, you got to figure this out because you're an adult. And he does. He is his own executive functioning. I don't act like that for him. But it is more frustrating when it's your partner. With your kid, for some reason, it's easier to offer grace, especially when they're really young. So maybe tackling it that way. I wish I knew.
Yeah, I don't want to speak to this specific person, but I know sometimes partners who are dealing with I don't want to call it denial, but like, refusal to accept what's going on. A lot of times that is because they love their family and they are afraid of the negative connotations that come with it. They're afraid that this is going to be just like it was for a doctor who says it to a kid when they're 7 years old, a huge bummer, and potentially also just the acknowledgement that life's just going to get harder. And the fact is that's just not true. And that is what ADHD Empowerment Month is all about, is realizing that there are good sides to this. So maybe one thing is when framing the conversation with your partner, trying to frame it in the way that we've done it in the last hour.
Yeah. And it's also hard when I am able to offer Penn a lot of grace because I see him working so hard. So if your person isn't seeing how hard you're working, that might actually be, maybe pointing out how hard you're working at something. I don't know. I wish I had better words. Sorry.
No, not at all. I do want to say someone wrote in, this is sort of related. She said, I suspected my husband had ADHD, but he wasn't diagnosed until he was in his 50s. We listened to your book and all he kept saying was, oh, that's what I do. Or, oh, that's how my brain works. She wrote to say, I felt it was the first time it really resonated with him. Yeah, we
have a friend who, she's such a sweet friend. She's 51 now, and she read the book. She doesn't have ADHD.
Just to be nice.
She doesn't have kids.
Yeah.
And she just read it just to support us and be nice. And she's like, oh, same thing. Oh, and then she went to and got a diagnosis, and she's like, my world makes sense now. I was struggling my entire life, and I didn't know that was not normal.
I mean, you got to remember this book, not this book, ADHD. If you find out when you're a kid, and you take some time to learn what it is, and you're a parent who teaches with a kid, it is a largely hereditary disorder, difference, whatever we want to call it. So like it's happened a lot.
Mm-hmm. And, okay. So a couple of related questions I'll try to squeeze in here. One is, a lot of people, as I mentioned before we started, writing in to say, hey, is this book good for teenagers? Is your book good for reading with my 11-year-old, 12-year-old? And I know that you have given some thought to this question. So I wanted to throw that out there.
I think, yes, parts of it for sure. Definitely the first chapter and first few pages, we try to make that as universally digestible as possible. There are going to be parts of it, and you'll even see on the Post-it note, it'll say like, this part's kind of intense. Like if you make it through it,
not inappropriate, just like
very sciencey and wordy, because at some point we want to explain it to people. But I don't know of any age of people who can read who weren't able to digest at least parts of it.
Yeah. And so for that reason, we get that question a lot every single day. So we are working on a children's picture book, and then also something kind of that tween age, maybe graphic novel, but obviously nonfiction. So it's taking those same concepts, making it more digestible for 11, 12-year-old. We had a lot of 12, 13, 14-year-olds at book signings who had read the book. So.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And then the sort of related question that I see in here quite a bit is worries. It seems like it's worries more from parents that their child will use ADHD as an excuse.
Yeah.
That's fine. Our book says it 20 times. ADHD is an explanation. It's not an excuse.
Not an excuse.
It is, and that's what it is. If you rest on the laurels of, I'm sorry, it's my ADHD. I understand a child. We're going to do that, but you also can teach them and say that very simple sentence. It's an explanation. It's not an excuse. Just like anything that you need to get better at, it's going to take some work and it's going to take some practice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's not an acceptable answer in our house. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going to close out with a comment we just received, which I think is in itself quite awesome. ADHD is awesome, fundamentally changed the way I see my brain. I used to see ADHD as the bad parts of my brain, and the good parts were just me. Now I have realized that ADHD is more neutral. My brain is an ADHD brain, and it manifests in challenging ways, but it also manifests in beautiful and sparkly ways. I also realize the most creative, compassionate, interesting, and adventurous people I know have ADHD. And it made me realize that maybe the ADHD contributes to what makes them so wonderful.
Oh, I love that.
Like she just wrote that right now.
I think we've accomplished everything we need in Empowerment Month in 1 hour.
And we can stop.
We can move straight to November.
No.
She just did it for
Everybody
us.
just has margaritas and solos.
Thank you. So he or she, sorry, I wasn't sure if that was.
Thank you that was from Tiffany. It was a beautiful way to end this conversation. Kim and Penn, thank you so much for coming back to ADDitude, and thank you for helping us to kick off ADHD Empowerment Month.
Well, thank you for having us. We always love being with you and your community.
Yes.
And thanks to everyone who was listening and everyone who contributed their stories and comments here today. If you would like to share this podcast with some loved ones or just revisit the stories and resources that we shared, you can go to ADDitudemag.com and search for podcast 523. The slides and recording are posted a few hours after the live webinar. And if you're listening in replay mode, you can just click on the episode description to get all the resources. Also, please know that our full library of ADDitude webinars is available as a podcast. It's called the ADHD Experts Podcast, and it's available on most streaming platforms. We hope we will see you again next week. Our free webinar will be on navigating rejection-sensitive dysphoria in relationships. And to make sure you don't miss any upcoming goodies from ADDitude during ADHD Empowerment Month and all year round, just visit ADDitudemag.com/newsletters and sign up to get all the alerts. Penn and Kim, thank you again so much, and happy ADHD Empowerment Month, everyone.